I only really like to make a picture, truly, which can be a tremendous failure and cost the studio $4 million, or be a worthwhile success. But anything that sort of plays it safe, you know, is a bit of a bore, I think.
Good evening, Mr. Billy Wilder, and a glimpse of his new film, The Front Page. And tonight I make no apologies at all for devoting this programme to the works of Mr. Wilder, not simply because he's won more Oscars and nominations than anyone else in the history of Hollywood, but more specifically as a gesture of gratitude for providing us with The Front Page, which I have no hesitation in describing as the most thoroughly enjoyable picture I've seen all year. So let's start off with a little biographical information. Billy Wilder was born in Austria in 1906 and worked on films in Germany and France before, finding himself in strong disagreement with the policies of one Adolf Hitler, he betook himself to Hollywood in 1934. And there, as director, co-writer and occasionally producer, he's made 34 pictures which have won him 20 Academy Award nominations and 6 Oscars. Well, I don't suppose you'll need reminding of the kind of work he's done, but just to jog your memory, let me throw a few titles at you. Ninotchka, Stalag 17, Sabrina, The 7-Year Itch, and The Apartment, and others which we'll be seeing in a moment. But let's turn now to his latest film, The Front Page. It's based on the play by Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur. It stars Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, and very briefly, it's about a bunch of newspaper men hanging around the press room in the criminal courts building in Chicago on the eve of a hanging. Lemmon plays Hildy Johnson, ace reporter of the Chicago Examiner, and Matthau is his cynical, ruthless managing editor, Walter Burns. Here's Burns telling Johnson how he wants the hanging covered.
Now, what I want's about 1,200 words. You know, lots of atmosphere. With the cold gray dawn and the voice from the death house singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, and the body twisting slowly, slowly in the wind. Well, I don't have to tell you.
Anything else?
Yeah, we'll need some last words from Williams as he walks up those 13 steps. Something with a punch to it. If necessary, make them up yourself.
Last words. You want some last words? I'll give you some last words. I quit.
Guy about to be hung. Nah, he wouldn't say that.
Not Williams, me. I quit.
What?
I'm resigning, effective immediately.
Those bozos on the Tribune, right? They've been trying to steal you away from me for years. How much are they paying you?
I'm not gonna work for the Tribune.
Damn right. Nobody walks out on Walter Burns.
Or any newspaper, Walter. I'm getting married.
Getting married? What the hell for? You've already been married.
It was some marriage, that was. I never even got to Niagara Falls because you made me get off the train at Sandusky to cover that torch murder.
That's what makes you a first-class reporter, Hildy. You're always in the right place at the right time.
But never at home, Walter. Not for Christmas, not for our anniversary. When she was sick in the hospital and nearly died, I was stuck in Tennessee covering that goddamn monkey trial. It's not going to happen again, Walter, not this time.
Okay, Hildy, you want to take the plunge again? All right. Tell you what we do. First you cover the hanging, then you can get married. Take the whole weekend off. You don't have to be back to the office until Monday.
Monday, I'll be in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia?
We're taking the midnight train. Tomorrow afternoon, we get married with her family and everything and everybody. And then Monday, I start working for her uncle in the advertising business.
The advertising business?
You heard me. I'm going straight. I'm quitting this racket.
You mean you're going to be writing crap like I'd walk a mile for a camel or a quick Henry the Flit?
You bet. For $150 a week.
Jesus, Hildy, you're a newspaper man. Not some faggot writing poetry about brassieres and laxatives.
The Front Page opens in London on Boxing Day, and if you want to give yourself a Christmas treat, look no further, because there it is. The play was written in 1929, but the humour is as fresh and sharp now as it was then. The comments on political corruption are just as apposite, and the monstrous crime reporters, eager to sell their own children for a scoop, are still to be found. When I first went to Fleet Street, I worked with people just like them, and I want to tell you they frightened the life out of me, and I was supposed to be on their side. Well, The Front Page has been filmed twice before, and so when Billy Wilder was in England the other day, I went to see him at his London hotel and asked what had prompted him to do it all over again.
Well, I always loved the play, and I thought it was never quite put onto film properly. The first time, in the very early 1930s, at the beginning of sound, it was produced by a gentleman who lived in this very hotel. In the entire upper floor structure here, Mr. Howard Hughes. he bought the play, which was a smash on Broadway, and made it into a film, Louis Milestone directing it. Louis Milestone, of course, you know, very, very great director, All Quiet on the Western Front, and many other superb pictures. It was done then with Pat O'Brien as Hildy Johnson, and I forget who played...
Adolphe Menjou.
Adolphe Menjou played, that's right, he played Walter Burns. It was at the very beginning of sound. They were not quite sure as to how to handle dialogue, and it had a great deal of that. It was at the height of censorship. They could not say many of the things that Mr. Hecht and Mr. MacArthur had written. The entire climax of the picture, the third act curtain, The Son of a Bitch Stole My Watch, could not be used. In fact, it was said, but over the objectionable words, the carriage of the typewriter, the sound of the carriage of the typewriter went, just so to make it possible. Then the second time was done like about 15 or 20 years later by Howard Hawks as His Girl Friday, and Hildy Johnson was not played by a man, but played by a woman. Roz Russell played it, and Cary Grant played Walter Burns. And that, too, was not quite, I thought, the play.
If Lemon and Mathau hadn't been available, could you have imagined casting the film with anybody else?
In fact, I don't think it could or should have been made with others than that odd couple of Lemon and Mathau. And it's very peculiar now how the two, who are great personal friends of each other and of mine, have sort of stuck together since that picture which they had made with me. It was called in America The Fortune Cookie. It was called in England, I think, Meet Whiplash Willie.
Yes.
But I always found that many of the best pictures made in Hollywood were love stories between men. By that I mean a teaming of Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy, of Abbott and Costello, if you want, of Laurel and Hardy, and now lately of Newman and Redford.
Yes.
Those are the great love stories. It was never Clark Gable and Joan Crawford. It is two men against each other, and I don't mean anything homosexual there. It is just, this is the great, interesting thing about those pictures. And Americans love to watch it, and I hope the rest of the world does too. And they are sort of they are two wonderful people on either side of the net playing tennis against each other.
How did I get here?
By stretcher and ambulance.
Oh, my head. What did they give me?
Whole gang of sleeping pills.
Where's the can?
Forget it. You can't get out of bed.
Wait, I can't go. Who says?
Hate to break it to you, kid, but you got a spinal injury.
What?
Your left leg is numb, and you got no feeling in the first 3 fingers of your right hand.
Well, you're crazy. I can move my hand and my leg.
Sure you can if you want to blow $1 million.
What are you talking about?
That's what we're suing for. They'll offer us $100,000. We settle for $250,000.
I gotta go to the camp.
There we are. Bring it to you.
What are you trying to pull? I'm perfectly all right.
There's one thing I hate. It's a patient who makes his own diagnosis.
This is ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with me.
That's what you think. Not only can't you move your hand and your leg, but you had this concussion. So now you got a ringing in your ears and double vision.
Double vision.
How many me do you see?
One cheap, chiseling shyster lawyer who, of all people, had to marry my sister.
Nice talk. I'm handing you $250,000 on a silver platter.
Don't want the money. Don't want the silver platter.
What's the matter? You feel sorry for insurance companies? They got so much money, they don't know what to do with it. They've run out of storage space. They have to microfilm it. What's $250,000 to them? They take it out of petty cash. So don't give me with the scruples.
One of the things that I noticed particularly about the film is the fact that when I've seen the front page done on the stage, it's often done as a jolly romp. But you seem to have mined a sort of underlying core of unsentimentality and ruthlessness, particularly in Walter Burns. that doesn't always come out. But Walter Burns really isn't a very nice character, is he?
He's not a very nice character, but he's a character you admire greatly because, like W.C. Fields, he says things bluntly into people's faces that everybody feels like wanting to say, but never has the guts to say. I mean, W.C. Fields' attitude toward children or toward women, it is refreshingly blunt and frank, and but it takes a particular actor with a great deal of acid charm to say it and to get away with it. And Mather just has it.
Earl, I need a picture of you.
Well, I don't have one on me.
Oh, we're gonna take it now. It's for the Examiner tomorrow, front page, huh?
Oh, really?
Hey, you know who that is?
Oh, shut up. Let's have your collar, too. It's celluloid, isn't it? Huh.
I'm calling the sheriff a hyena. What do you like with it? Vile, corrupt, unscrupulous, depraved?
Yeah, and in that order.
He can sue the paper for $1 million.
Let him. We'll take it out of your salary. Here. When I say now, drop this in there. Got it? All right, Earl. Ready? No, Earl, no smile. Give me that hunted look. Cowering, fearful of every sound, of every footstep, like an animal at bay. Hold it. No! That's it. Take this over the paper, have it developed immediately.
Yes, sir. Goodbye, Mr. Williams. How we coming?
Beat it.
What are you gonna do with me now?
Just trust me. Dubby, listen. We're gonna rip out the whole front page. Kid's on his way over with a photograph. Where do you see it? Hildy's knocking out the story now. Yes, I said Hildy.
Well, he's not exactly cruel. He's just a dedicated man to his profession, no private life, just going about his job by hook and crook, just elbow job and throwing dirty curves. Just nothing is too much for him. He's just a totally unsentimental man who's at the same time not corrupt, because he does it for his job. He does it for what he's dedicated to, namely the circulation of the newspaper. This is his religion. And he just does it. In other words, Burns or Hildy Johnson or all the other guys of that gang in that city room in the criminal courts building in Chicago, they are not particularly callous or particularly different than newspapermen were or still are.
This is, I think, the 10th film you've written with Izzy Diamond.
Yes.
Now, what kind of a relationship is that you have with him? I would think it must be fraught sometimes, surely. There must be rows, there must be temperaments.
Not really. There are periods of silence. But the beauty of working with I.L. Diamond is that we know everything about each other. We do not waste time telling each other stories of our youth, inquiring about our families. This is all done with, you know, after you work with a man for that many pictures. We arrive in the morning, 9 o'clock, like two bank tellers. We hang up our hats and our coats. We have some black coffee. We read the trade papers, and we go to work. Not a word being wasted, and how's your daughter, and your son, and how was that party last night? None of that nonsense. That is all done with. And we just concentrate on work. And I have tremendous respect for him, as I hope he has for me. There are no fights because there is an element of generosity. If I say something and we plot it together, we map out the scenes, we write the dialogue line by line. If he doesn't like something, it is just thrown in the ash can. I will not prove to him, look, this is marvelous. You're just stupid. This is very, very funny. the same thing goes the other way, naturally. And we don't talk, we say things, but we don't just talk just to talk. And sometimes we just sit there and stare at the floor, at each other, for 2, 3 days, sometimes for a week. We just don't say anything, unless we have a suggestion and something that is worthwhile. And we have that much respect for each other that we it goes through kind of a censorship of your own mind. Will I make an ass of myself, or does it make sense? But we write and we throw away, we write again, we look at it, you know. Pictures are not written, they are rewritten. Pictures are not made, they are remade, you know. It's all a question of discipline and of is this the best we can do?
Which are the favourites, your own favourites, among all the films you've made?
Well, I don't look at the old ones ever, no matter what it is, but I kind of think that...
No, I'd heard that. Now, why won't you look at your old films?
Because I see the mistakes, and I would like to hurry it up. I would like to recast it. I would like... You know, you cannot do that anymore. But it's just... I don't have 8 or 16 millimeter prints of my pictures in my cellar. I don't invite my friends. I just don't like it. I don't like it very much. So maybe the best picture, since you asked me, the picture I liked the best maybe was an early picture of mine, Double Indemnity. Maybe that's the one I kind of liked the best. And there were moments in Some Like It Hot that I thought were good, in Sunset that were quite good. And I was very pleased to see an interview with Agatha Christie, who said that the best picture made of her material was a picture I had done, Witness for the Prosecution. That was before Orient Express. And I was very pleased about that. But there are good 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there. In other words, if someday they do a retrospective of my pictures, and they can get it all into like 45 minutes of film. 2 minutes from that, and 10 minutes from that, and 3 minutes of here. That would make me very happy. That I will look at.
Well, alas, we can't run to 45 minutes, only wish we could. But I did promise a few minutes ago that we'd be seeing some of Mr. Wilder's earlier films, and so here's a montage of clips from 3 of them. Let me provide a little background information. Double Indemnity, which he's already mentioned, and which he directed in 1944, was his first major picture. He wrote it in collaboration with the incomparable Raymond Chandler from a James M. Cain novel about an insurance salesman who murders his mistress's husband for the insurance money. Ace in the Hole, made in 1951, showed Wilder both as director and co-writer in bleak, cynical mood. It's the story of a journalist on the skids who discovers a man trapped in a desert cave and delays the rescue operation to keep the story in the headlines. Kirk Douglas, whom we're about to see confronted by fellow journalists, played the anti-hero. The film was quite a vicious indictment of gutter journalism. And, of course, Sunset Boulevard was one of the wittiest and most cynical of all films about Hollywood. Wilder and Charles Brackett won the Oscar for their screenplay. Gloria Swanson made a startling comeback as a faded silent star, desperate to resume her career. William Holden played her gigolo come scriptwriter, and Erich von Stroheim was her erstwhile director and husband, now relegated to the dual role of butler and chauffeur. Here then are moments from each of these films, starting with the first fateful meeting of Mr. McMurray and Miss Stanek in Double Indemnity.
You're a smart insurance man, aren't you, Mr. Neff?
Well, I've been at it 11 years.
Doing pretty well?
It's a living.
You handle just automobile insurance or all kinds?
All kinds. Fire, earthquake, theft, public liability, group insurance, industrial stuff, and so on right down the line.
Accident insurance?
Accident insurance? Sure, Mr. Dietrichson. Wish you'd tell me what's engraved on that anklet.
Just my name.
As, for instance?
Phyllis.
Phyllis, huh? I think I like that.
But you're not sure.
I'd have to drive it around the block a couple of times.
Mr. Neff, why don't you drop by tomorrow evening around 8:30? He'll be in then.
Who?
My husband. You were anxious to talk to him, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, but I'm sort of getting over the idea, if you know what I mean.
There's a speed limit in this state, Mr. Neff. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.
Suppose you get down off your motorcycle and give me a ticket.
Suppose I let you off with a warning this time.
Suppose it doesn't take.
Suppose I have to whack you over the knuckles.
Suppose I bust out crying and put my head on your shoulder.
Suppose you try putting it on my husband's shoulder.
That tears it.
Look, boys, I don't care where you come from. New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, or the moon. Nobody goes down to see Leo.
What about Tatum?
It's out of bounds. Why? Because it's dangerous down there. Because a wall could fall in on you. Because I'm sheriff and because I'm responsible for everybody's safety.
What about Tatum?
Out of bounds. You heard me.
What about Tatum?
You're repeating yourself. This is a pretty nice place I've fixed up here for you boys. Be ashamed to cut all these wires and kick you out.
Don't try it, Mr. Sheriff. We wouldn't take that kind of guff from J. Edgar Hoover, let alone from you.
We came all the way out here to do a job, and we're going to do it.
It's out of bounds.
Now you're repeating yourself. How come it isn't out of bounds for Tatum? How come he goes in as much as he wants to? What about Tatum?
That's right. What about Tatum? Howdy, fans. Why, it's like old home week. Glad to see you, Mac. Mr. McCardle used to work together in New York. And if it isn't Jessup, big-hearted Mickey Jessup. Thanks for the $50 you didn't send me. Guess he didn't get my wire. And what do you know, Josh Morgan? Where was it, Boston, Chicago? All I know is he's got a hernia.
Sitting pretty, aren't you, Chum? Got everything sewed up. Leo, the sheriff. Try to talk to the father, the mother, the wife. Well, what do we get? See Tatum, see Tatum.
He's a friend of the family.
Now, what's your beef, fans? Your smart cookies? Big city newspaper men. There's a lot of good stories lying around here, all yours. The weather, the crowds, the Indians, inside stuff. How they weave a rug.
Cut it out, Chuck. We're all buddies. We're all in the same boat.
I'm in the boat. You're in the water. Now, let's see you swim. Buddies.
You're not properly dressed for the occasion.
What's the occasion?
Have him come up, Mac.
Up the stairs.
Suppose you listen to me for just a minute.
Madame is waiting.
For me? Okay.
If you need any help with the coffin, call me.
This way. In here. I put him on my massage table in front of the fire. He always liked fires and poking at them with a stick. I've made up my mind we'll bury him in the garden. Any city laws against that?
I wouldn't know.
I don't care anyway. I want the coffin to be white, and I want it specially lined with satin. White or deep pink. Maybe red, bright flaming red. Let's make it gay. How much will it be? I warn you, don't give me a fancy price just because I'm rich.
Lady, you got the wrong man. I had some trouble with my car, a flat tire. I pulled into your garage until I could get a spare. I thought this was an empty house.
It is not. Get out.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you lost your friend. And I don't think red is the right color. Wait a minute, haven't I seen you before? I know your face.
Get out, or shall I call my servant?
You're Norma Desmond. Used to be in silent pictures, used to be big.
I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
As it happens, a number of Wilder's pictures are featured in the current National Film Theatre season Paramount Part 2, including two films which Wilder scripted with Charles Brackett, but did not himself direct, Midnight and Bluebeard's Eighth Wife. Also showing is The Major and the Minor, yet another Wilder-Brackett collaboration, which is particularly significant because it was the first Hollywood film Wilder directed. It was made in 1942 and starred Ginger Rogers as a hard-up, disillusioned New York model who tries to hustle herself a half-fare trip home to Iowa by posing as a 12-year-old. It's worth noting that although all Wilder's successful films have in common at least a touch of cynicism, as well as wit and humour, they cover a wide variety of subject matter, all the way indeed from farce to the serious and compassionate study of alcoholism in The Lost Weekend. So I asked Mr. Wilder how, if at all, he would describe his style.
So in other words, there is no cohesive Wilder style because I make all kinds of different pictures.
Except I think you did once say that you like to mix a little vinegar in the cocktail.
Whatever I do, of course, it's never going to be wildly sentimental, and whatever little thing I would like to say, which makes them talk about it, 15 minutes after the picture is over, nothing bombastic, nothing earth-shaking, but still, if they talk about it, and if I can sell a kind of a thing that makes them stay with it and discuss. No solution, mind you, but an interesting question, let's say, at the end of the picture. That's highly rewarding.
Never losing sight of the fact that it is entertainment.
Or if it's not entertainment, believe me, it's just murder. It just has to be. It has to hold them there. They have to drop the popcorn bag and pay attention and be involved. I don't always succeed, but I try.
Mr. Wilder, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I can get up. I'm out of camera by now.
Billy Wilder, and who better to wrap things up for the year? Now watch closely, because what you're observing are the dying moments of film 74. But before you start hurling yourselves about in paroxysms of grief, take heart. We'll be back on January the 7th as sparkling, new, accept no substitutes, film 75. And even before then, as a matter of fact, film 74 will make a positively farewell appearance at 12:45 in the afternoon of New Year's Eve, when I'll be presenting a special 45-minute package of the pick of the year. Don't miss it, or you'll never forgive yourselves. So until then, let me leave you with another slice of classic Wilder. Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon in drag, and Marilyn Monroe most definitely not in drag in Some Like It Hot. And with that, it merely remains for me to say good night and to wish you all a very happy Christmas. Goodbye.
All right, girls, let's take it from the top. And put a little heat under it.
Can't you sleep?
If I could sleep, would I be laying here calling God at 2 o'clock in the morning?
What's the matter?
Nothing.
Something's the matter, Mel.
You know, it's 12 degrees in here. Middle of a goddamn heat wave. It's 12 degrees in here.
I'll turn the air conditioner off.
Then how do we breathe? 84 degrees outside and it's 12 degrees inside. Either way, they're going to get me.
You want another one?
Good evening. Well, there we had Jack Lemmon and Anne Bancroft in The Prisoner of 2nd Avenue, and I'm here to tell you that if any comedy this year is setting out to be wittier or sharper than that one, it'll have to be pretty damn good. But then The Prisoner of 2nd Avenue was written by Neil Simon, and there's nobody around who writes better dialogue than he does. Sparkling, crackling stuff, and not a dirty word in it. I had that last bit somewhat ruefully, because later in the programme I'll be talking about a new British comedy, Eskimo Nell. And just for now, all I'd like to add about that is stay tuned in, but don't hold your breath. Also in the programme, I'll be looking at a batch of animation films that can be seen at the Institute of Contemporary Arts, and talking to Richard Taylor, who, among other things, is the animator on Crystal Tips and Alastair. But at this point, let's get back eagerly to the best picture of the week, The Prisoner of 2nd Avenue. And very timely it is too, bearing in mind that America's rate of unemployment is the highest it's been for 13 years, and things aren't looking all that rosy in this country either. Jack Lemmon plays a Madison Avenue business executive who's fired as part of his company's economy campaign. And the rest of the story is about the way he reacts to this, the way he plunges into a nervous breakdown and eventually fights back. The magnificent and highly fanciful Anne Bancroft plays his wife, and between the two of them and Neil Simon's script, it's an absolutely splendid film. It was directed by Mel Frank, who made A Touch of Class. Well, I've no way of knowing what you thought of A Touch of Class, but as far as I'm concerned, The Prisoner of 2nd Avenue is better, more believable, more touching, and a lot funnier than that was. The clip we saw at the beginning of the programme is from a scene early on in the picture. As you remember, in the middle of a New York heat wave, Lemon is quite unable to sleep. So let's take it from there.
You want another blanket?
I got another blanket.
I called the superintendent. He said he'd be up to fix it tomorrow.
Why don't they bother printing on it high, medium, and low? Everything's high. Low is high, medium is high. One of these nights I'm going to put it on high. They'll have to get a flamethrower to get us out in the morning.
What do you want me to do, Mel?
Go back to sleep.
I can't sleep when you're tense like this.
I'm not tense. I'm frozen stiff.
Are you sure there's nothing else?
There's nothing else. Go to sleep, Edna. God.
Do you mind if I tell you something? Do you mind very much? You were tense when you walked into the house tonight. You've been tense for a week. What's bothering you? I've seen you when you get this way. What is it?
It's nothing. I'm tired.
I'm up, Mel. You might as well tell me.
Well, I'm telling you, it's nothing. I don't know. It's everything. It's this apartment, this building. It's this city. Now listen. Listen to this. 2 o'clock in the morning, one car's driving around in Jackson Heights. We can hear it. 14 stories up, I hear the subway better than I hear it in the subway. We're like some kind of an antenna here. All the sound comes up through this apartment and then out to the city.
You lived here for 6 years. It never bothered you before.
Well, it's worse now. I don't know why. Well, I'm getting older and more sensitive to sounds and noise. 2 o'clock in the morning, you believe it's still going on next door?
What's going on?
What, are you trying to be funny? You don't hear that? You must be deaf.
I must be deaf. I don't hear a thing.
Well, listen, for God's sake. You don't hear the beat, beat, beat of the tom-tom as the jungle shadows fall and the tick-tick-tock of the stately clock as it stands against the wall night and day? You don't hear that?
Not when you're talking or singing or whatever it is you're doing, I don't.
It's those 2 German airline hostesses. Every night they got somebody else in there. 2 hockey players, 2 basketball, whatever team's in town. Win or lose. Nobody loses when they wind up in there. Every goddamn... Somewhere there's a 747 flying around. Everybody's serving themselves because those 2 broads never leave the apartment. Holy... Come here. Tell me you can't hear that.
Yes, now I hear it.
Is it any wonder I can't sleep at night?
Don't sleep with your head next to the wall. Sleep in the bedroom.
Oh, the way you knock it off in there, it is 2 damn o'clock in the morning. I cracked the wall. I barely touched it, and I cracked the wall. It's lucky I wasn't trying to hang a picture. We all could have been killed.
It was starting to crack before. They're coming to fix it on Monday.
Not Monday. No, tomorrow. I want that fixed tomorrow. Do you understand?
I'll tell them.
And tell them about the air conditioner and the window in our bedroom that never opens unless it rains, and then you can't shut it until there's a damn flood. And then tell them about the toilet that never stops flushing.
Stops flushing if you jiggle it.
Why should I have to jiggle it? With the money that I'm paying around here, do I have to stand over a toilet in the middle of the night and jiggle every time I go to the bathroom?
When you're through, get back into bed. Tell me and I'll jiggle it.
You go to bed, Edna. I don't want to talk about jiggling anymore. Do you hear me? Please go to sleep.
I can't sleep, and I know you're walking around up here having an anxiety attack.
I'm not having an anxiety attack. Just a little tense. Oh, God.
Well, this looks like being the year in which James Caan either elevates himself to superstardom or lays a series of giant eggs. Up to now, I suppose he's best known for the role of Sonny in The Godfather. But before 1975 is out, he'll have been seen in 5 new pictures. The first of these, Freebie and the Bean, was featured on this show last week. And now, treading hard on its heels, comes the second, Cinderella Liberty. Cinderella Liberty is American Navy slang for a pass which expires at midnight, and Caan plays a Matelot who is given such a pass from the Shore Hospital, where he's being treated for a boil on his backside. In the course of his leave, he meets and sleeps with, and after a while falls in love with, a part-time hooker and poolroom hustler. And any resemblance between Marsha Mason, who plays that part, and Minnesota Fats is purely non-existent. If you think they look alike, run, don't walk to your nearest optician. However, Miss Mason lives in penury and has an illegitimate mulatto son who doesn't like white people, or honkies as he calls them. So you can see the romance has its complications. What we're presented with actually is the kind of love story that might appear in serial form in some permissive and liberated women's magazine. It calls for a certain suspension of disbelief, especially at the end, but it's not without its touches of humour and tenderness, and both Mr. Caan and Miss Mason are very good indeed. This is the moment in her crummy apartment when he asks her to marry him.
See, I've been racking my brain here.
I know you have. Don't worry, something will shake loose soon.
Well, see, I've been tiptoeing around a possible solution.
Well, let's not have secrets. What is it?
Well, I thought we could get married.
Now I heard everything.
The advantage to, excuse me, that particular plan there is that you and Doug could receive Navy benefits, see?
Navy benefits?
They'd pick up the whole tab for the baby and everything. Now, I want you to know that, I mean, I don't hold this thing so sacred. You know, I want you to know that. I mean, some fine-looking girl to come by. That's something I've never seen before, and whang, you know, I'm ready. See, this is something that you should know, Doug. I mean, there's something you're going to find out eventually anyway by yourself. What I mean is that, you know about men and,
I already know.
Yeah.
Well, the thing of it is, you know, the baby would be legitimate.
That's right.
We could name it John Jr. I sure would like that.
No, that's no good. I'm John Jr. It'd have to be John Baggs III. Third.
Third?
Yes, ma'am.
That's even better. I mean, somebody named John Baggs III is going to have a steady job.
See, the first sign of a hassle, I mean the very first sign, I would want to feel free to go elsewhere. I mean, if it can't be like that, well, then there's just no sense in discussing it. I mean, no sense in discussing it at all.
Well, for Mr. Khan, that makes it 2 down and 3 to go. It's a little early yet to say how well he's faring on his sprint to the top, but watch this space. Well now, Dead-Eye Dick and Mexican Pete were working Dead Man's Creek. They'd had no luck in the way of certain purely personal matters for nigh on half a week. Perhaps you knew that already, and if you didn't, I'm sure your children did. The point is, however, that no matter how unfortunate Dead-Eye Dick and Mexican Pete were, they still had far better luck than the people involved in the film version of that epic poem, Eskimo Nell. Admittedly, it's not a bad idea, a film about a bunch of fledgling filmmakers conned by a dishonest and seedy producer of porno movies into bringing Eskimo Nell to the screen. But it's all ruined and made highly embarrassing by a witless script that relies for laughs on the frequent expression of one four-letter word and the near expression of another. Michael Armstrong, who plays the young film director, also wrote the screenplay, and he ought to be ashamed of himself, because all that smut has spoiled what might have been rather a good farce. As it is, Roy Kinnear and the delicious Katie Manning work hard to bring an element of style to the proceedings, but it's a pretty forlorn cause. However, the young filmmakers are obliged to turn out 4 versions of Eskimo Nell. 1 pornographic, 1 clean for the Society for Moral Reform, 1 gay for a homosexual backer, and 1 that converts the plot into a kung fu musical. Prudence Drage, who plays the kung fu singer, is possibly the best thing in the picture.
Set me reeling. Love, only love can bring this wondrous feeling. The flowers greet the sun and smile for everyone, bringing love's own priceless treasure. And then my heart takes wing and suddenly it sings, I love you.
The animated cartoon film has come a very long way indeed since the early days of Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse. They used to belong entirely to children, but not anymore. Nowadays, the animated cartoon has moved into all kinds of unexpected areas. Into social satire, for instance, with Nicholas Spargo's Disgusted Binchester. Into pornography with the randy adventures of Fritz the Cat, and sometimes into a combination of the two, like Henry 9 to 5. Well, every Friday at lunchtime, the Institute of Contemporary Arts is showing a half-hour programme of new British animated cartoons. And when you look round the otherwise desolate landscape of the British film industry, it's interesting and encouraging to note that in the animation field at least, we're well up to international standards. Well, since this is, after all, International Women's Year, I thought it'd be rather nice to begin this brief survey of contemporary cartoons with a look at the work of two female animators, both graduates of the London Film School. The first of those we're about to see, Green Men, Yellow Woman, was made by Thelma Goldman. The second, putting on the Ritz, an affectionate and nostalgic tribute to Fred Astaire in the musicals of the 1930s, is by Antoinette Starkiewicz, and it very properly won her an award at the International Animated Film Festival in Zagreb last year.
You will go, darling.
Before you can count up 1,
2,
3,
4. There's a small hotel with a wishing well. I wish that we were there together.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where Harlem lit? Putting on the Ritz, spangled gowns upon the bevy of high browns from down the levee, all misfits. Putting on that certain Ritz, that's where each and every Lulu belle goes. Every Thursday evening with her swell bows, rubbing elbows. Come with me and we'll attend their jubilee and see them spend their last 2 bits putting on the Ritz. If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where Harlem lit? Putting on the Ritz, spangled gowns upon the bevy of high browns from down the levee, all misfits, putting on that.
Bigger is Better is by Derek Phillips, who's both a professional musician and very possibly the most prolific animator in the world. He's made nearly 50 films, most of them single-handed, and that, believe me, is quite a feat. However, in the case of Bigger is Better, a rather sour look at the ravages of property speculation, he had the help of John Daborn, who did the backgrounds. Incidentally, Derek Phillips is now working on a series about illiteracy for the BBC. And now a change of mood. Toulouse-Lautrec was made by Jeff Dunbar with the aid of the Arts Council, and what he did, quite simply, was to take some of Toulouse-Lautrec's better-known canvases and animate them, like this. And now to talk about animation, animatedly no doubt, I have with me Richard Taylor, who has his own company and makes films both for industry and television. As I said earlier, Crystal Tips and Alistair was one of the TV subjects he worked on. But before we get down to the chat, let's have a look at his contribution to the ICA programme, Icarus. Dick, that's a splendid but very short film. How did it come about?
Well, it's an excerpt from a film that was made around the Guinness Book of Records, and that being rather a medley of a book. The film was a medley of a film, and there were various short sequences on various subjects. Icarus is mentioned in the script as being the first man to fly, and that served as the peg for that sequence.
Is it something you'd rather like to develop further? Because it looked fascinating there.
Well, certainly the idea of something like the Greek myths as a subject for a series of films had interested me. But as an actual project, that is now a little past, and I'm not sure that I would go back and develop the same thing. I mean, take that actual piece, Icarus, and develop it further.
Well, obviously one of the problems is the matter of getting money to make animated films. Is that more difficult than ever now?
Yes, it's always been difficult. When I went into the animation business, I imagined that if I was lucky, I would eventually get to the position where I was making entertainment films. As it happened, I arrived more or less with the decline of the cinema, and television has always found animation very expensive to do as a project. I mean, there are very few television companies that feel like making the initial investment in the very expensive process to wait the length of time they have to wait to get the money back.
So where is your biggest market now? Presumably in industry, commerce, commercials?
Yes, I think most people make a living by making films for which the money is guaranteed already, that is, commercials and sponsored films.
It seems a shame because the work in that series of films at the ICAs is obviously very uneven, but some of it seemed to me to be very good indeed. The techniques of the animated film are improving all the time.
Yes, that's so. I mean, I think particularly the cell work, the final drawings, which made up the Lautrec film, are probably about some of the best that have ever been done in the medium. The actual girls themselves who did those final drawings deserve a big pat on the back.
But what sort of direction is the cartoon film moving into at the moment? Because technically, as we said, it's getting better, but the story content doesn't seem to be moving very far.
Well, that is the case. Part of the result of being dependent on sponsored work and advertising, in which the content, the message is given to you, is that animation studios, particularly in this country, have developed a great deal of expertise on the drawing side, but they don't have storymen because they don't need storymen. To a large extent, the stories are supplied to them, and this, I think, is a pity, because I think cartoon films should be an equal balance of manner and matter, and for them to become simply bits of moving art is not really a good thing.
Well, no, because surely the lesson from Disney, is whether you like his films or not, is the balance of the story with the artwork, and has been immensely successful.
Well, this in fact was Disney's particular talent, and the thing on which he always leant. He was always the man who came in and interfered in the story stage, and he'd see the thing stage by stage, and if it wasn't developing as he conceived the story should develop, he would stop it and wipe that piece out and get something else done.
But nowadays, the animated film, apart from the odd one from Disney and occasionally from Eastern Europe, is a short film, isn't it? As I was saying earlier, the sort of rather trendy social satire subject. Is that the way it's going to continue?
Well, I think it is short for two reasons. One is that it's a lot of work to make a minute of film. And the other is that being a very compressed medium, it's hard to take over a long period. I don't think even a great many of the Disney features are easy to take, and if they didn't have his extremely hard control of the storyline, it would be much harder.
Dick, thank you very much indeed. And, well, I hope you have actually, before we go, there is one project that you have very much in mind to do, or would like very much to do.
Yes, I've always thought that there is a novel by Andrew Sinclair called Gog, which would make a splendid film with a combination of live action and animation.
Well, this is a way in which animation hasn't been too much used in films, isn't it? Combination of the two.
Yes, that is certainly the case. You get things like Dick Williams's titles for Charge of the Light Brigade, but then they were sort of like separate, as it were, titles, although they came at intervals throughout the film to make points. But in the case of Gog, it would be taking the same story in and out of live action and animation.
Oh, watch out for that one.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Well, animated films can certainly now be treated as an art form, and Jeff Dunbar's film on Toulouse-Lautrec was financed by the Arts Council. Another new Arts Council film is Monet in London, made by David Thompson, former director of the ICA. It shows some of the pictures which Claude Monet painted in London at the turn of the century, and puts them into context by mixing them with contemporary photographs and live-action footage of the Thames. So first, let's look at some of the shots of the Thames today.
Often, I used to start at 4 in the morning and work till sunset. That gave one a good chance of catching the same kind of light many times. I could have up to 20 or 30 sessions on the same canvas.
And now here's how Monet saw similar scenes. During the winter months of 1899 to 1901, he painted about 100 canvases. Monet's words are spoken by Michael Goff.
I only know that I do what I have in mind in order to express what I feel before nature, trying to convey my impressions in the presence of the most fugitive effects. I am driven more and more frantic by the need to render what I experience, what nature does to me.
And finally, a preview. The Great McGonagall is Spike Milligan's version of the life story of everybody's favourite bad poet, William McGonagall. Milligan plays the title role, Peter Sellers plays Queen Victoria, and the script is by Mr. Milligan and the director Joseph McGrath. It tells the story of the poet's journey to Balmoral in 1878 to present his dreadful poems to the Queen, a story of utter humiliation which ended with him being ignominiously turned away by the gatekeeper. It was a rotten thing to do because poor old McGonagall had no idea what a terrible poet he was. He thought his stuff was pretty sharp. Well, I've not seen the film yet, but I have read the poems, and here's a scene in which Milligan, as McGonagall, imagines he's in the presence of Queen Victoria and recites the first stanza of perhaps his most famous poem, The Railway Bridge of the Silvery Tay. Incidentally, they're watching a Royal Blue movie at the same time. Don't ask me why.
The beautiful railway bridge over the Silvery Tay, with your numerous arches and pillars in so grand array, and your central girders, which seem to be almost towering up to the sky.
The greatest wonder of the day, and a great beautification to the River Tay. Most beautiful to be seen, nearby Dundee and the Magdalen Green.
She kens my work. I know notice Prince Olaf caught the son-in-laws.
Yes, he caught the daughter as well. I'm having him detained for my pleasure.
Well, after he'd written that poem, unfortunately the bridge fell down, so McGonagall wrote a sequel, The Tay Bridge Disaster. It starts like this. Beautiful railway bridge of the silvery Tay. Alas, I'm very sorry to say that 90 lives have been taken away on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a very long time. Marvellous, that is. It's not poetry, mind you, but it's marvellous all the same. Well, the Great McGonagall opens in the West End with a royal premiere next week. And next week, too, I'll be back here with Lauren Bacall. Until then, I'll leave you in the presence of Queen Victoria. Good night.
You
caught a girl named Billy Brown.
Her eyes were as black as flood.
She had red hair
and an aquiline nose.
Oh, night you caught her with another love.
Says I, Billy Brown, I've caught you. It does.
So with your darling Shelley,
I gave him such a whack,
which left him cold upon his back.
Just the echo of a smack, Jim Crack. Shall we dance, Your Majesty?
Good evening, and I'm sure you recognise the sinister George Raft, he of the patent leather hair, as one of the two hoods rubbing out a victim in Scarface. And there'll be more of George Raft later on, when Philip Oakes reviews new biographies of Raft, James Dean and Paul Newman. And also tonight, we'll have a report on the aftermath to last week's GLC debate on film censorship. But first, let's have a look at the week's new film, Death Wish, which raises questions of morality rather than censorship. It stars Charles Bronson, it's directed by Michael Winner, and it's had an enormous and even alarming success in America. Bronson plays a New York businessman whose wife is murdered and whose daughter is reduced to a catatonic state after they've been attacked by muggers in their home.
Who is it?
Groceries, ma'am.
If he gets hurt, Mother, just hold still. Don't move.
What do you want?
Don't jive, Mother. You know what we want.
Well, as a result of the very nasty scene which follows, Bronson turns himself into a one-man vigilante band, prowling the streets of New York, encouraging attacks by muggers and shooting them dead. According to the script, he becomes a popular hero, and indeed a popular hero is precisely what he became in the cinema. Audiences in America cheered ecstatically every time another mugger bit the dust, and the film had a box office success to rival that of The Godfather. Defenders of the picture claim that it's merely an updating of the old Western code, and therefore no more sinister than, say, dear old John Wayne cleaning up the heavies without benefit of a badge in El Dorado. But I believe that's a cop-out, and so is Michael Winner's disingenuous statement that he, as the director, doesn't condone Bronson's actions, he merely shows what might happen if muggings continue in New York at the rate of more than 1,000 a week. But we're not talking about the Wild West, we're talking about a serious problem of today. And when a vigilante is portrayed with as much sympathy as actor, director and script lent him here, Then we have a picture that at worst might incite people to take the law into their own hands and at best provide an excuse for those who do it. It's well made and well acted, but since the police are shown as being reluctant to prosecute Bronson because such a move would be unpopular, and since presumably the New York police haven't objected to this allegation, I found the morality of the picture distinctly worrying. However, here now is the vigilante in action, setting himself up as a target for the muggers.
Hey, mister, got a match? Yeah. What else you got? Let's see the money, man.
You'll have to take it.
Well, as I expect you know by now, the GLC decided last Tuesday night to retain its function as a film censor for adults. What all the argument was about, briefly, was this. Mrs. Enid Wistrich, the chairman of the council's film viewing board, wanted the GLC to abolish its role as censor for adult audiences, and I think it's only fair to stress that she was talking about adult audiences. The system at present, and now I suppose for the foreseeable future, is that a film that's been refused any kind of certificate by the British Board of Film Censors can be submitted to the GLC's viewing board, which can then, if it so wishes, give it an X certificate. Mrs. Wistrich's suggestion was that cinemas should be left free to show any films they chose, but at their own risk. The risk, that is to say, of private and even public prosecution for obscenity or indecency. Well, she lost that battle by 50 votes to 44 in rather historic circumstances. For the first time in GLC history, the chairman, vice-chairman and deputy chairman all left the dais to take part in a division and to vote, incidentally, in favour of censorship. The following day, Mrs. Wistrich resigned from the film viewing board. But before she did so, I talked to her, to one of her most determined opponents, Councillor Ray Langton, and to various cinema-goers about the whole issue. Why did you feel it was a good idea to abolish censorship for people over 18?
Because I think that films in the cinema are now the only medium which is subject to this kind of very rigorous and, I would say, repressive censorship. Nobody says that because a few books are pornographic or convey undesirable messages in some people's minds, that every book must go in front of a censor. And the same thing is true for the theatre. Censorship in the theatre, in the form of prior censorship, was abolished in 1968. And I think this is discriminatory against the cinema and isn't warranted.
But it has been argued, of course, that there isn't actually a bill to do with the cinema as there is to do with theatre and obscene publications.
Yeah.
Do you think the absence of that bill may have turned the vote against you?
Yes, I think that was a factor, and it is perfectly true that it would have been very much more satisfactory to have had a bill, which a new cinematograph bill, and I would still hope that this would be considered by Parliament and by the Home Office. But the Home Office, over the years, have always refused to look at this question. They have been asked on two definite occasions by this council, for example, to do so before my time, and they've always turned it down. They've preferred to stick to the present system because I think they think it causes them the least trouble. And therefore they haven't been prepared to consider it. But I do hope very much that they will do so at some time in the future.
Of course, the great criticism made against you on this particular motion was that it would open the floodgates of pornography. Do you feel that there was any chance of that happening?
Well, the funny thing was that the cinema distributors and exhibitors took the contrary view. They wrote a letter to us, which was distributed to all the councillors, saying that, to the contrary, they feared that cinema managers would be so worried about the threat of prosecution that they would become over-cautious and over-timid. So they didn't take that view. I think there was a certain question mark as to what would happen. It would certainly have depended on whether any kind of new legislation was introduced or not, and to what extent prosecutions took place. I think that is why I was glad to accept the amendment that we should try this out for a probationary period.
I know it has been said by Mrs. Wistrich and by others that if the recommendations had gone through last night, in fact this morning, then it wouldn't really have made a great deal of difference, because film managements would have been very careful about what they would put on in order to prevent being prosecuted, or the danger of prosecution. However, I don't think that this is really necessarily the true picture, mainly because of the flaw of the vacuum that would be left in the event of GLC unilaterally throwing away its powers.
But after all, you were only talking about abolishing censorship for people over 18. Now, it doesn't seem too unreasonable that people over 18 should be allowed to choose for themselves what films they wish to see.
Well, this is reasonable to a point, except for one thing, and that is that it is fairly common knowledge that although the legal limit is 18, in practice, young people from 12 upwards do get into ex-certificate films. And of course, if they were uncertificated films, they'd get into those. It's one of these unfortunate things that people want to do what is forbidden, and no young person feels himself a man or a girl, as the case may be, unless he has seen at least one X-film.
But then are you not applying your standards, in a sense, almost the lowest common denominator? What you're saying is that this film is not suitable for a 12-year-old to see it, therefore an 18-year-old may not see it.
No, I don't think so. You see, it's just a question that if you are allowing films for 18-year-olds and upwards, then one would consider the type of films that could be shown in that light. Now, obviously, if you're looking at 12-year-olds, the situation is entirely different. And a lot of the films that could well be considered suitable for people sufficiently adult to be able to take a reasoned view of what they see may not apply to younger people. And it is a fact that something like 1/3 of the people in any given cinema will be under the age of 18, even though it's X pictures being shown.
Well, the other alternative, of course, is that you don't have censorship at all for people over 18.
Well, of course, if you don't have censorship at all for over 18s, and of course there are a lot of people who subscribe to this view, then this is ignoring the fact that there are a lot of extremely dangerous films about. It's only as a result of my long experience in viewing films on the GLC, and I have viewed virtually every film that has come before the GLC in the last 8 years. It's only as a result of that experience that I realise that there are a lot of extremely highly dangerous films about.
No, I think people over 18 will see films like that anyway, so there's no point in censoring them. But for people under 18 years of age, I think censorship is still very important.
Nobody over 18 is forced to see anything they don't want to see, and I think if you're going to be corrupted, by the time you're 18, you know whether you're corruptible or not and what is likely to do you any harm.
I think it was wrong to ban people from the cinema. I mean, if the censors think it was right, does it have any effect on them when they see the films that they ban?
Quite honestly, when you're 18, I think you should be able to make your own decisions on what you see. I don't think those decisions should be made by other people for you.
They ought to give everybody the opportunity of seeing what they're censoring. You know, who are they? We're just as intelligent as they are.
I think that we should return to what I think was called the X film and restrict it, in the first place, to those over 18, but go even further and have censorship on many films that are shown today that, in my opinion, are near pornography than just straight cinema.
What are your views on violent films?
I'm sure that too many violent films are shown on in the cinema and on television.
People at 18 can vote and do and other things, so why shouldn't they see what they like?
Well, after that, and to test the reactions of at least part of the film industry itself, I also spoke to director Carol Rice, whose new film The Gambler opens later this month, and to John Trevelyan, who was for 13 years the secretary of the British Board of Film Censors, the organisation that was established by the industry itself as long ago as 1912 to act as its own watchdog and guardian of morality.
First of all, as we saw in a recent case, the GLC certificate doesn't protect you from the law. Therefore, it's a kind of superfluous testimonial. Secondly, I think that there is absolutely no reason why filmmaking, like everything else, shouldn't be subject to the common law. That if a man wants to make money out of that kind of stuff, he should be subject to the common law. Equally, if a man wants to go and see those films, he should be confronting the law, not some intermediate referee.
Well, to start off with, I think a lot of people thought if Mrs. Westridge wins the day, from tomorrow morning we can go and see any porn film in any cinema in London. This would have been total rubbish anyway. There's quite a lot to be worked out. This was a point of principle. Secondly, I think that if it had come off and if they worked out these things, one of the things to work out was how to be a little more effective in keeping under 18s out of cinemas. I mean, I'm not condemning the cinema managers. They do their best, but there may be ways of tightening it up. What I think would have happened is that the main cinemas, the Odeons, ABCs and so on, would be running just the same stuff as they run now, even in their X films. There might be an odd cut put back or something like that. As far as the sex films are concerned, I don't think we would have had anything more than exists now, because the Greater London Council Film Viewing Committee have been passing the stuff for the last 2 or 3 years. The difference would be, major difference, that under the licensing system, that is the board and the local authorities, there appears to be some degree of protection for film companies from getting in the courts. Now, this would have meant over to you. It's your responsibility if there's trouble, and I understand that the major associations in the trade didn't particularly want the change.
Well, do you imagine, or do you suppose, that this matter will all come up again fairly soon, or do you think it's a dead issue?
Oh, it isn't a dead issue at all. This is not the end. This is the beginning. This is the first chapter of a new development in social history in this country. Of that I'm convinced. It's been moving that way steadily, and I think rightly. You see, what various things have got to be done, which I think will be done. First, the Obscene Publications Acts. They're full of anomalies. I must tell you, I've got an invoice at the moment from the stationery office which says the Obscure Publications Act, which I think is rather nice. They need revising. There are all kinds of different acts, some of which go back to 1824, the Vagrancy Act. They're brought in because other ones don't work. Now, if they've been taking cases, as they have in the past few years under the Obscene Publications Act, that involves juries. Well, juries seem to be throwing these cases out right and left. Even if the judge says this is dirty stuff you ought to convict, the jury doesn't agree. I think this is very indicative of public feeling in this country. People are getting fed up with being restricted. Well, why can't I make the choice as a man?
And so now the dust has cleared and we're pretty well back where we started. Nothing much has changed. But already there are demands from certain areas for even more stringent censorship than exists at present. And I think we can reasonably assume that we haven't by any means heard the last of that particular matter. However, on now to a lighter topic. Just published are biographies of 3 men who in their various ways have made a considerable contribution to the cinema: George Raft, James Dean and Paul Newman. My distinguished friend and colleague, Mr. Philip Oakes, has been casting a stern, critical eye over these volumes, and so now I think the best thing I can do is to let him tell you about them. Phil.
Biography is one of the new terrors of death. I didn't say it first. The phrase was coined by a canny Scots physician named John Arbuthnot, who's never seen this programme because he was born in 1667. But he might well have had any of these 3 books in mind. Louis Jablonski's canonisation of George Raft, for example. Nice chap, George, superstar in the 1930s, kind to his mother, open-handed, patriotic. It's just a pity that so many of his pals were gangsters. That wasn't his fault, of course. He He was born in Hell's Kitchen in New York, the birthplace, coincidentally, of James Cagney, who was just tried and failed to suppress a biography of himself in this same series of books. Like Cagney, George Raft danced his way out of the slums. He became a dancehall gigolo at $2 a day plus tips, and became known, or rather notorious, for his ultra-sexy performances on the dance floor, and off it, one gathers. In fact, at least half the book is a celebration of George Raft as super stud, the man who could pleasure 7 starlets in a night. My dancing, he says, in one felicitous phrase, often led to my getting laid. I suppose I got into a happy rut. I know what he means, I think. Dancing brought him to Hollywood, where he smouldered as a ballroom chic in films like Bolero and Rumba. But he really made the grade as a movie gangster, a part he played with great success and minute variations in umpteen films. Rumour and publicity always hinted that art was imitating life, that perhaps, just perhaps, Raft really was the hood he was playing on screen. The book strenuously denies this, but here's how it looked in 1939, when Raft played opposite James Cagney in a big house melodrama, Each Dawn I Die.
Every morning when you wake up in your cell, just remember that the boys will be working their ears off for you.
Don't worry, Bill. I'll take it easy. When I get out, I'll have a story to write.
There are a couple of reporters. You know, smart guys that are always writing about crooks of yeller and crime don't pay. The DA don't like that because he knows better. So he sends this guy to the jug.
Won't be long, Frank. He'll be out before you know it.
He's going in and out. Just like that. Clever boys, these reporters. Write a piece about me when you get out, will you? The name is Stacy. Life sentence. I like to read my name in the papers.
If you don't shut up, you may find it in the obituary column.
Oh, my goodness. Hey, Deputy, will you change my seat? I don't like to play so rough. He run over a couple of guys, so he thinks he's tough. You know how it is with the first couple of guys.
I don't think he's so tough.
No?
No.
How tough are you, babe?
That's good. That's good. Right on the forehead. Let's take him.
Cagney acted him off the screen in that one, but there's no doubt that at his best, George Raft had extraordinary presence. He offered star material, and any good director knew how to use it. What's more, he had a trademark which he patented in Howard Hawks' classic 1932 gangster movie, Scarface. Here he is as the loyal but doomed henchman of gang boss Paul Muni.
Hello, Tony.
Tony, Tony, no! Tony!
27 years later, Billy Wilder remembered the moment when he was making Some Like It Hot.
Spats Colombo, delegate from Chicago, Southside chapter. Thanks.
Hi, Spats. We was laying 8 to 1. You wouldn't show.
Why wouldn't I?
We thought you was all broken up about Toothpick Charlie.
Well, we all gotta go sometime.
Yeah, you never know who's gonna be next. Okay, Spats, report to the sergeant at arms.
What for?
Orders from little Bonaparte.
All right, Spats, get your hands up.
What's the idea?
Little Bonaparte don't want no hardware around. All right, you're clean.
You're not.
It ain't loaded.
Next. What's in here?
My golf clubs, putter, niblick, number 3 iron.
What's this?
My mushy.
See you at the banquet, Spats.
Where did you pick up that cheap trick? Come on, boys.
This year, George Raft will be 80. He's banned from entering Britain by order of the Home Secretary, and he's unlikely to make another film. It's a pity, I think, that this prurient and tattling book is how he'll be remembered. There must be a more interesting man beneath the whitewash. The really weird thing about the James Dean cult is that it rests on no more than 3 films. That's all that he made. And it only took off after Dean's death in September 1955, when, en route 466, he crashed his new sports car into an old Ford sedan, driven by a student with the incredible name of Donald Turnipseed. Posthumously, Dean became one of the biggest stars of the 1950s, the mixed-up kid of Rebel Without a Cause, which is the name of his second film, the peaky, androgynous hero, hurt by the world and adult misunderstanding, violent and vulnerable, beautiful and damned. He was born in Middle America, in Marion, Indiana, in September 1931, came to New York, made a big impact on television drama, and was snapped up by Warner Brothers. Elia Kazan directed his first film, East of Eden, and while there's no doubt that he had a tremendous rapport with the young actor, he didn't care for him too much. I remember him describing to me what it was like working with Dean. Difficult, to say the least. He was a little pudding of hatred, Kazan told me. Dean's last film was Giant, directed by George Stevens with Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson, whom Dean detested. He was killed before dubbing on the picture was completed, so that some of his lines are in fact spoken by another actor. We'd have liked to have shown you clips of Dean's films, but unfortunately they're tied up in litigation. After his death, the legend began that he'd survived the car crash, and somewhere, hideously mutilated, he was being kept from the world by his studio, anxious to protect their investment. It's not true. James Dean died at the age of 24, and the movie's lost a great actor. This biography by David Dalton strains to be literature, and I don't mean that kindly, but it's worth reading for a very detailed and absorbing account of the making of Rebel Without a Cause. Interestingly, it also tells how James Dean was in line to play Billy the Kid in a film called The Left-Handed Gun, and the boxer, Rocky Graziano, in Somebody Up There Likes Me, two very meaty roles which went, you've guessed it, to Paul Newman. It's not the kind of fact you'll discover in Charles Hamlet's biography of Newman, a very shoddy job indeed, which substitutes admiration for information, but no doubt Newman will survive it. He's had worse to contend with, including his first film, the uniquely awful The Silver Chalice, a religious epic in which he turned up as Basil the Slave. They really don't make them like that anymore. He's also managed to live down comparisons to Marlon Brando, and he did so with a series of quite brilliant performances in films such as Robert Rossum's The Hustler and Martin Ritt's Hud, in which he played a present-day cowboy dedicated to the decline of the Old West and the seduction of Patricia Neal.
I don't like sudden passes.
Really ease into it, then. There's another one coming up on your right.
Don't you ever ask?
Well, the only question I ever ask any woman is, what time is your husband coming home? What's keeping you? You're over the age of consent, ain't you?
Way over.
Let's get our shoelaces untied. What do you say?
I'd say I've been asked with a little more finesse in my time.
I wouldn't want to come on crude. No, ma'am. I'll bring you a 2-pound box of candy, maybe a bottle of perfume from the drugstore.
How about some colored beads and wampum?
Whatever it takes to make you trade.
No, thanks. I've done my time with one cold-blooded bastard. I'm not looking for another.
It's too late, honey. I already found him.
Newman's screen partnership with Robert Redford has produced two of the biggest hits in recent screen history, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting. It seems, though, that as far as acting is concerned, he can take it or leave it, which seems to me quite admirable. And there's no doubt that even if he never wore grease paint again, he'd still be a force in films as a director. He's directed his wife, Joanne Woodward, in 2 movies so far, The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds, try saying that after you've had a drink, and Rachel, Rachel, a beautifully observed story of love and loneliness, which is a favourite of mine.
Child! Carla, I have asked you before not to call me child. It sounds ridiculous.
Sorry, slip of the tongue. You coming up? I'd come down, but I'm busy trying to get my eagle back in his cage.
Jacob, will you get your aunt down here? Oh.
If you want to know more about Paul Newman, I suggest you stay with his films. As George Bernard Shaw said, when you read a biography, remember that the truth is never fit for publication. How right he was.
Thank you very much, Phil. I enjoyed that. And so we come to the end of another edition of Film 75. But apropos the item about censorship, I thought I'd just mention before I go Andy Warhol's Flesh for Frankenstein. Andy Warhol, now, there's a man who knows a bit about censorship. Well, I'll be talking about this camp gothic horror, the film I mean, not Andy Warhol, in next week's programme, and I hope you'll join me then. But for now, I'll leave you with superstar Paul Newman showing off to Catherine Ross in that famous bicycle ride in Butch Cassidy. Good night.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Good evening. You may not have recognised the clean-cut features lurking behind that diving helmet, but actually they belong to Mr. Ray Milland, as on behalf of Cecil B. DeMille, he struggled with a giant squid in Reap the Wild Wind way back in 1942. Well, I'm happy to say that Mr. Milland is with us now. Mr. Milland, welcome to the show. I chose that clip because I gather that thereby hangs a dreadful tale of drunkenness.
No, not drunkenness or debauchery, just a very bad hangover.
Well, I look forward to hearing about that later on, because I'll be talking to Mr. Milland about his career and indeed about his autobiography in a few minutes' time. And now our guest of the evening, Mr. Ray Milland, a man of very many parts, as he reveals in an extremely readable autobiography, Wide-Eyed in Babylon. He was born and brought up in Wales, although no doubt to his secret shame, he's often masqueraded as an Englishman for Hollywood purposes, and was at one time a trooper and sharpshooter in the Blues. I think it's true to say that he drifted into acting, possibly because it seemed to beat working, but without any deep belief in his own ability to grace that profession. Nevertheless, he's had a most successful career from 1929 till the present day, and in 1946 he won an Oscar for his performance as a dipsomaniac in The Lost Weekend. His first minor success came in The Flying Scotsman in 1929, when he knew virtually nothing about acting at all.
You know, Jim, this last one means rather a lot to me. I shall miss the old 80 mile an hour. You want to get a motorbike? It isn't a joke, young fella. Mine's a responsible job. And I don't like giving it up.
You all right? I'd sooner look after a dozen girls than a Flying Scotsman. Though she is a fast bit of goods. Just a minute. Just a minute. Look at these. As funny a bunch of beauties as ever you saw.
Horrible. Take my advice, young man. You'll get hold of a decent girl and settle down.
As a matter of fact, Bob, that's just what I'm thinking myself.
And as a matter of fact, that is, a few years later, is exactly what Mr. Milland did. Well, soon after that film, he went to Hollywood, where he was murdered by Charles Lawton in Payment Deferred, and at this point he was enjoying a very up-and-down career, mostly down and wandering sort of aimlessly back and forth between Hollywood and London. But in 1935, he made The Gilded Lily with Claudette Colbert, and things began to look up. 3 years later, he had a big box office success, and indeed his first genuine leading role in her Jungle Love, in which he co-starred with an unknown called Dorothy Lamour. He came back to England to make French Without Tears, returned to Hollywood, where he co-starred with Claude Rains, and, as he says, practically every other actor of British origins in Forever and a Day. And in 1943, he was in a pleasant and frivolous little romp called The Major and the Minor, in which, for devious reasons, Ginger Rogers purported to be a 12-year-old schoolgirl. And this film, directed by Billy Wilder, was, as I hope Mr. Milland will explain in a moment, to have important repercussions later. Mr. Milland, you're looking at that with horror.
Well, it's only the fact that I've got a lot of black hair there. And I was a lot thinner. And I wish I was there.
Well, look, can we go right back to the beginning and clear up the whole mystery of what happened in that tank in Reap the Wild Wind?
Well, I'd gone out the night before to a party given by the Office of Inter-American Affairs. We were at that time, I think it was 1942, I think, and we were currying favor with Latin America because of the war situation. And as I spoke Spanish, I was asked to MC part of the show and to have dinner and everything else. So I sat down at my table and I found myself between two of the Gabor sisters.
That can't be bad.
Well, in those days, no one knew them. And all they did was talk, and you couldn't understand a word. And my agent's wife was sitting across the table, so she motioned to me to come and sit next to her for a few moments. She wanted to tell me something, and she said, look, these are two Hungarians you're safer off not to be associated with. And you better stick next to me. So I stuck next to her, and of course I can't drink very well. I'd had about 4 or 5 glasses of champagne, and the evening ended, and I remember driving home. How, I don't know. But I got home, parked my car on the lawn, and went to bed. And it was, I knew early in the morning, and I had an early call anyway. But I knocked on my butler's door, and I said, Fred, wake me up at 6:15 and get me to the studio. He said, what are you going to bed for? I said, I want to sleep. He says, if you're going to get up at 6:15, why waste time? It's 5:45 now. I said, do what I tell you. I was really far gone. So I went to bed, and sure enough, he got me up. It seemed like 12 hours later, but it was only about 12 minutes later. He drove me to the studio, and I got me into the makeup chair, and I actually passed out. And I said, please get me into that tank as quickly as you can before the director comes on the set. I don't want him to see me in this condition. Get me into the diving suit, start pumping in the oxygen, and I'll be all right. I came up that night at 5:45. I thought DeMille and his entourage had left the set, and I was safe. So I got up, and they unscrewed the faceplate, took the helmet off, and sat me on a box. And there he was. And he presented me with his personal Academy Award, which was a silver $50, which had been minted many years before by the government to honor Virginia Dare, the first white woman born in Virginia. And he said, for the finest acting I have ever seen in my career, I present you with this. I felt awful. I felt so ashamed.
Well, they do say that God looks after drunks, and in the knowledge that the actor was stoned out of his mind.
I thought I was a little child.
Well, drunks are little children. It's about this time in your book, you were, about the time that film was made, you were saying that you didn't really think you were cut out to be an actor, that you weren't psychologically and emotionally...
I still think so. Oh, really?
So you made a long career out of it.
Well, it paid very well for a long time, and I'm not one to turn away deserved award, you know. I just went into the business because it was the only business I could earn a decent